Hey, Transplant community, my name is Jim Burrell, and I'm extremely excited once again today to present to you one of my brand new programs in this brand new series, My Story, My Words. And I'm super excited today about the person we've got on board with us, the one that's going to share her story. Her name is Marion Bennett. She's actually been a part of this program really nearly since the beginning, not exactly, but close enough. She's been following the program at least for a good bit of time, and has always been a tremendous supporter of the program itself. Not only of myself, but one of those people who you find commonly in the comment sections or replying back to things on Facebook, asking or answering questions for others. Just a huge supporter of all things transplant. That's what makes her a special part of the transplant helper community. So I'm just going to let her tell her story. That's, again, what this is all about. My story, my words. And so, Marion, it's good to have you with us today. Let me just kind of kick this off by asking you, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for having me. That was quite an intro. I am Marion, and I'm a 2.5-year heart transplant survivor. I live in Maryland with my husband. We've been married for 17 years, and I work from home for a national medical spa.
Well, you stay busy working. Were you working from home before the pandemic?
No.
Oh, so this is new.
Pandemic actually is a blessing for that.
Yeah, my wife typically, she's out of the office today, or she would be right behind me over here, and it's been a whole different ball game for her working from home, and more for us. I've got 5 children, so having us all at home together this much, and especially when we need to be quiet so she can do something that's real, has been different. So we've adapted anyway. Well, I'm glad you have the opportunity to work at home anyway, and to kind of keep things rolling along with that. Tell me this then, how were you first introduced to transplant? I mean by that, what brought you to needing a transplant? How did you hear about it? That sort of thing.
Well, like you, I was born with TGA, and mine was congenitally corrected, so I never had any surgery. I spent my entire childhood once a year seeing a cardiologist at a children's hospital in Pennsylvania. And once I left home and moved to Maryland, I was working and going to school, and I started noticing that I was putting weight on, and I started feeling, just more run down and more tired. Mm-hmm. And I'd never had any issues with my heart. Growing up, I couldn't really play sports or anything because I would notice that I just couldn't keep my breath long enough. But this was different. This was starting to get pretty scary. And I had gone to one of those minute clinics, and they said, "You have bronchitis." So they gave me that codeine cough syrup, and I was taking that quite a bit and just sleeping, not getting any better, feeling worse and worse. And I eventually went to a different doctor that my parents recommended. And the minute he looked at me, he said, "We need to get you in the hospital. I know exactly what's wrong with you." And I was in pretty serious congestive heart failure. I was 22. And this was back in 2002.
Wow. Well, one of the things you mentioned there, and I want to clarify, she mentioned that she has TVA. That's transposition of the great arteries. Some of you don't know my story, and you're just learning hers. So it's transposition of the great arteries. I had the same thing at birth. Mine, thankfully, was discovered within a week. At least they, knew something was going on. I was actually operated on at 6 months. So it was a blessing that you didn't have to go through the operation part, but I've been there and done that as far as the restrictions.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's the things you really, really want to do that every other kid's doing. You can't quite pull that off. Although I tried. There was a lot of times I tried, and we're kids, so we're pretty resilient. We try. Another thing that I heard you saying in that really caught my attention is you're talking about kind of the delay and them knowing what's going on. I've heard it so many times, things like bronchitis being thrown out when someone's, short of breath, tired, fatigued, that sort of thing. And so I hate that you had to go through that little hump to get where you needed to get. And then the cough syrup obviously it can mimic heart failure symptoms once you take the cough syrup. So it kind of probably confused things a little bit more. So kind of a whirlwind for
absolutely.
you there, wasn't it? Just the shock of finding out something was wrong.
But that was the very beginning. That while I was in the hospital, I was there for 2 weeks, and I ended up having a stroke in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Pennsylvania in a small town hospital. So they sent me to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And when I went to Johns Hopkins, I met a doctor who still is in my life. We're very close. I adore him. And he introduced himself as the chief of Transplant. And I told him to leave my room because I wasn't having one of those.
I heard that.
So I maintained for, I'd say, 16 years or so on just on medication. Maintained the heart failure and lived a perfectly normal life.
Now, that is a blessing within itself. I waited from the time it was first congenital. Of course, we hear things like this all our life, but from the time I was officially told this is going to be the result, I waited about 6 years. So you got even more than that, which is a blessing. I tell people all the time, every day they wait is a day they had. And so I was one of those people like you probably. You were happy that they were able to keep pushing this procedure back and pushing back the actual transplant, right?
Oh, absolutely. In my mind, it was never going to happen.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on it.
Yeah. Well, then what happens next, basically? Where did they mention transplant? How long does the process go from there to actually get you listed?
Oh, until 2016.
Okay.
It was a Sunday, and I had all these plans for my husband's birthday, and he was on the phone with his mother. I apparently came down to the kitchen. I don't remember this. I came down to the kitchen, and I told my husband that I was feeling pretty dizzy, and I leaned down over the countertop, and then I just went backwards and passed out on the floor. And I was dead. So I went into cardiac arrest. My husband, thankfully, knows CPR. He's a first responder, and he was able to bring me back and keep me going until the medics arrived.
Wow. So that definitely what we would call in the South the kick in the gut. Then that the shock of this days before you're still probably in denial that anything's actually going to have to come out of this, and then all of a sudden, just on that average day, it hit. So you were then rushed to the hospital, obviously. What happened from there as far as transplant?
They gave me a pacemaker defibrillator,
right,
and sent me on my way. And I was feeling great. 2 months after that happened, in October, we went on a Mediterranean cruise with two of our friends, and I had never felt better. I was able to hike and walk, and I felt wonderful. And then over the next few months, I just started to slow down again, and the heart failure was coming back, and I had to stop working. They listed me for transplant in June of that year, so June or July of 2017.
Okay. You mentioned the pacemaker in there. A lot of people don't realize it, and definitely I didn't. I know you didn't probably at the time, but there is such a repeatable pattern sometimes that comes in for many of us. Now, we're all different, obviously. Your story's slightly different than mine already. I didn't have to go through the cardiac arrest, that sort of thing. But things like the first step being, they suggest transplant. Second step, they put you on some medication. Third step, you may end up with a pacemaker defibrillator. Fourth step, may be an IV drip. And then if there's a fifth, it may be an LVAD or something. A lot of people, I see them at least in the Facebook groups, and people I talk to, they're kind of shocked. They're like, oh no, they're going to have to put in a defibrillator. I'm like, look, they put in a defibrillator in everybody that's having rhythm problems. There's just a lot there that comes in that is thankfully routine for the doctors, but boy, it doesn't feel routine when it's us, does it?
Absolutely. But I'm very thankful that I had that defibrillator because it did go off.
Oh, wow.
One time. And that was quite a scary experience.
Yeah.
But from then on, from the time the defibrillator fired, from then on, I was just downhill.
Okay. Answer this question because people will be wondering. I had a defibrillator that never went off. A quick story that happened to me the day that I got mine. I asked a doctor that was in my room, would it hurt if it went off? My main doctor said no, that I may not even notice it. He stepped out the door, and one of the fellows that was with him stepped back in the door. He said, he's lying to you. It's going to knock you on the floor. It's going to hurt. What was your real experience with that?
I remember I was getting ready to go out somewhere, and I was standing in the bathroom, and it just, I was getting dizzy and my heart was pounding, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, please don't let this thing. And then as soon as I'm thinking that, it went off. It feels like you're being kicked from the inside, but I didn't fall down. I'm still standing, so I don't know how that happened.
That was a lucky blessing. I don't know what all of it compiled into one. I've got a good friend. He's much older than I was at the time, but his went off pretty regular. And to the point, which is sad, but he got to the point where it would go off and he would just dust himself off and go on. I'm like, man, go to the doctor when that happens. Call somebody. But he made it part of his day. But he said it was not fun by any means. So, okay, so you're eventually listed. You just mentioned the time frame in that. How long were you actually on the list before the call came for you?
I was on the list from, June or July of 17. And in Maryland, we have to be hospitalized. We have to have a swan catheter inserted and 2 inotropic drugs going in order to be on, at that time it was a 1, level 1 to receive your heart soon. So I went into the hospital, I believe it was April 3rd of 2018.
Well, that's similar to the standard that we had. They've changed a lot now. The system has actually changed. The numbering system, the qualifications for each level are much different, and won't get into that. But I was on the same listing system where you had the 1, the 1A, the B, that sort of thing. And, it was very similar for us. Being in hospital was a main qualification for being anywhere in the 1s or 2s, and then depending on how many IV meds, and I did not have the SWAN. My anatomy would not accept it, and so I got what's called an exemption on that, which you enjoyed the SWAN in 2017. It was kind of, it confined you to an extent, and so I'm glad I missed that one. But, very similar there. So you waited from that point. What was it like to get the call? Let me say that way.
Well, I had just, it's funny, I was in there, April 3rd, and May 10th, the doctor walks in, he's, just walking in the room like normal, and I said, why are you here by yourself? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's when he told me that he's pretty sure I'll be receiving, a heart that day. It was very exciting, but to be honest with you, I had just ordered breakfast. I was very hungry. So I said to him, oh, does that mean I can't eat my breakfast?
How did he answer that?
He's like, no, take it away. Absolutely not.
I was in the middle. I was in the middle of eating supper when my call came. That I got a dry run before that, but that's another story. But I was in the middle of eating supper when my real call came, and had already finished one sandwich. And when they came in and said, okay, you're MPO to further notice, I said, well, I just ate. And they said, well, don't eat any more. And a little secret behind that, I called, we had room service there. It was hospital food, but still you could call 24/7, order whatever you wanted. And I called back down to the kitchen and ordered a whole nother meal of the same thing. And wolfed it down right quick because I knew that, it's MPO to further notice. I'm not recommending this. Everybody look at me in the face. I'm not recommending this. But I knew it was MPO at further notice, but I knew from experience that it could be, it could be 12, 24 hours. It could be a long, long time. And I don't know, for some reason, that sandwich that I was eating that night suddenly became great, and I wanted another, so I called down and ordered another. I didn't actually finish the second, thankfully, but I remember when they came and got me to take me down for surgery, which really was 5 o'clock in the next morning, so it was 7, 8 o'clock night, 5 the next morning before I even went to pre-op. So it'd been plenty of time, but I remember thinking, boy, my belly sure is full for this. I hope they don't have a problem. So, but yeah, it was I'm sorry the doctor cut you off, but we all know why they do that. So part of it.
Absolutely.
Those words MPO, by the way, for a transplant patient, once you know that code, they're good words. As dreadful as being without food and water is, when they walk in the room and say you're MPO to further notice, or however they word it, that's how mine was worded. That became good news. So, yeah. So you got the actual call. You go down. How did the surgery go for you? Was it smoothly, or what?
Well, while we were, while I was being, tested and everything for transplant, my cardiologist had said, I really don't want you to have an LVAD. He said, you'd be a great candidate for it. You could, live with that for years and be fine. But because I hadn't had any previous surgery, they wanted to keep everything easily accessible.
Right.
So my surgery was very, very fast. It was over within 2 hours.
Whew, that's quick.
So no complications. Everything was smooth and beautiful.
Wow, that's getting into the Doctor Strange hands right there, something to be able to pull that off. My surgery, somewhat comparable, really. They had told me because of the prior, it's why they avoided yours, but because of the prior surgeries, that I may have a lot of scar tissue. So they expected my surgery to last as much as 14 hours. It ended up lasting 5, which terrified my family, because when they come out after 5 hours and want to talk with the family, they assume something went wrong. But they got in, and it was a blessing. They did not find near the scar tissue and the problem that they thought they would. And especially coming from a TVA, I can't hardly talk, coming from a TVA heart, a transposed heart, there's some complications there as far as I call it the plumbing and the hookup that can come in. Okay. So to knock your surgery out that quickly was really, really a good sign.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, how about your recovery since that point then? Tell me again the date of your transplant.
It was May 10th, 2018.
Okay, May the 10th, 2018. How did your recovery go from that point?
At the time, I thought it was horrible. I was in a lot of pain, a lot of sternal pain, and everyone that I knew previously that had had transplant had told me they didn't have that much sternal pain at all. So for me, I thought this was awful. Looking back at it now, it was very, very easy. It was a very simple recovery, but there is sternal pain, and it's not fun. And they do the best they can to keep you medicated and keep that at bay. I only stayed in the hospital for 11 days after surgery. I came home, and 2 weeks later, I had an arrhythmia. So I woke up in the middle of the night, and my heart rate was probably around 190. So I had to be rushed back into a hospital. They couldn't get me into Hopkins for some reason at the time, so I went to another local hospital and waited. And when I was able to get into Hopkins, they did a cardioversion, and that stopped it. And I stayed in the hospital for another day or two on amiodarone to control the arrhythmias. And after that, I haven't had a problem since. The biopsies were very easy, very simple, and I've always had either a 0 or a 1.
That's excellent.
Which is excellent news.
Well, I remember, I'll just say this. I remember of course, I know some things never get shown, but I remember some of your shortly after recovery photos, that sort of thing, and you look great to me. And the fact that you got out in 11 days, that's a blessing. There are people who get out a little quicker. Most don't, though. Most stay in quite a bit longer than that. That was certainly a blessing, and it shows me that you probably got on your feet pretty quickly then after that, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was very important. Right.
So no more arrhythmias since you got the cardioversion done. So hopefully that That's not something you want to happen within the first few weeks of transplant. So you just need
No.
everything to go smoothly and no scares. But again, just to say it, and y'all just heard her say it too, but sometimes there are going to be some bumps in the road, and it may be rejection, which you didn't really have. It may be,
No.
Rhythms are very common for that to happen. It's just possible that a lot of things could come into effect, but don't think what's happening, saying that first week is the way your life's going to be for the next however many years you're blessed with or what have you. They're all different. I've gone through it. Horrible day. Wake up the next day and it's like the day before never even existed. It's a brand new look at things every day. So that's absolutely good. Well, tell me then this. This is a question that can come in behind the recovery, I think, pretty well. What are the worst? We'll do the hard one first. What's the worst and best thing that has come out of transplant for you?
For me, I think the worst thing is just having to be so hyper aware of bacteria. The restrictions on food. There really aren't that many restrictions on food, but some of the foods that I absolutely love, I'm not able to have any longer. Like sushi or raw oysters, things like that. And now with COVID, just having to be so extra cautious as an immunosuppressed person.
Right.
But for the most part, I haven't had very many negatives from this at all. It's, it's, go ahead.
Well, no, we were somewhat trained for COVID. That's that's the positive. I'm straining to pull out of this every time. We were kind of trained for this situation through what we've already been through and our caution that we have to take. The rest of the world's having to take it now or needs to be. But that made it difficult. So the worst for you then, just some of the restrictions, and I can totally understand that. Now, I take some advice from a good friend of the program. His name is Mike Willis. I've quoted him so many times before. His quote is, everything in moderation, including moderation. So when people see me post pictures of cheeseburgers and pizzas, I eat cheeseburgers and pizzas, folks. I don't eat them every day. I try to balance that, that sort of thing. And I'm not eating those foods. You mentioned sushi. Thankfully, I don't eat that because I know that there are certain foods that really can cause problems more than likely in that case. But that restricted diet does hurt a little bit because you have to stop and think. You have to consider, is this going to be worth me feeling like trash for a day or long-term causing more issues?
Exactly. My goal in life right now is just stay out of a hospital. So I'll do anything to do.
Have you been able to do that so far? Have you not had to go back in since the aversion?
No, I haven't. Just for biopsies.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. I had several of the you catch every stomach bug kind of things that put me in, so I didn't have that. But thankfully, past the first year, much of that improved. So, all right, now tell us something good. That's not too bad. So I'm proud for you. But tell us something good that's come out of transplant. Something that you're just thankful that you went through this. I'm
just thankful that I wake up every morning and I don't feel, I'm not stuck feeling horrible and having trouble breathing, and I can go on walks and I can, make future plans with my husband and watch my nieces grow up and be with my family. It's just such a blessing. And I also was able to meet my donor's family. Absolutely, and I keep in touch with his mother. And it's just to know that I'm helping to keep somebody's memory alive as well, just by being here, is amazing.
I met my donor's family as well and stay in contact with them very regularly also. And we don't always directly talk about it. I talk to my donor's mama usually on Sunday night every week or two, depending on how our times run. So that's a blessing, but we don't always just bring it out. We just talk. I mean, we just talk like I'm talking to my mother. But at the same time, I can feel moments, and I can hear in her voice sometimes moments when she is just so happy that I called, or just so happy that we got in touch that day. And it's not just because she likes Jim Merle; it's because it's a part of her, And so she called, I call her my donor mama, and that's about how I feel about her. So that's an absolute blessing. And those extra moments, extra days that you're able to spend with your family is absolutely great. Well, let's give some advice. I always try to give advice. I don't know how good I do, but hearing advice from you would be excellent. Give your best advice that you can come up with on a short notice on what you might tell someone. Either they're waiting for transplant, they're nervous about that, or maybe they're just shortly out of transplant. We're just about as scared then as we were going in. So some good advice to someone who's waiting or shortly out of transplant.
My advice for someone waiting is walk around that hospital or walk around wherever you are as much as you can. Get as much leg strength as you can, because you can't use your arms and you can't push with your arms after your surgery. The first time that the first time that my nurses had me stand up, there was one on each side of me, and they were holding my arms, and I actually pushed up with my legs and stood up without their help. So that's something you want to get as much strength as you can before.
I absolutely agree. It was pre-transplant, so it was during part of my transplant evaluation. I had to meet with some rehab people, physical therapists, and a guy told me one time, he said, Jim, keep your legs. No matter what you do everything you can. If you can't do anything but pump up and down against the footboard on the hospital bed, keep your legs, because if you can keep those, you can get out of bed after transplant.
Yeah.
And it makes all the world of difference. So that's great that you came to know that and you understood that. What about someone maybe who's just out of transplant? You want to answer that one too?
Sure. I don't really have much advice, but I just let you know it will get better. You will feel healthy again. Your nausea will go away. The medications will slim down. Trust me, in the beginning, it's just so overwhelming, and you feel like this is the worst decision ever. And then you move past that and realize what a blessing it really is.
And I'm glad you brought two of those things out, the nausea and the shaking. I still see people now, again, in the transplant support groups mostly, but I ask, I'm shaking. I'm 2 weeks out, and I'm shaking so bad. What's going on? It's the medicine. All of it's the medicine in the beginning. Do you call your team sometimes? Absolutely. Don't hesitate. You don't overlook anything, but typically speaking, that's just the medicine. It's just, you're going to feel like yuck, as I describe it sometimes, but it gets better. It definitely gets better. Well, anything else you want to add to this? I may have missed so much about your story that you wished you could share. Anything else you want to add to this that maybe we overlooked?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Okay. Well, I'm excited that you've been through the journey that you have. I know it takes hindsight to appreciate it sometimes. We don't necessarily, I don't wish this on anybody. I have people all the time who say, I'm having heart trouble. I've been thinking about seeing if I can get a transplant like you did. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't go asking. But if that's what your journey holds, I'm here to help. So many people like you, Marion, are here to help as well. But I don't encourage that. But I'm thankful that you were able to go through the journey that you did. I'm especially thankful for you today for sharing that. I know you've shared it along the way through Facebook and different things, and I really appreciate that. You've encouraged a lot of people. I know in the past, I'm sure you do the same in person when you're around. Back when we were able to hang out in clinic and just have a good time. We don't do that as much anymore, but I really appreciate you. I'm just thankful that everything's going well, and I hope that you catch up with me one day. I'm 7 years and maybe 8 months or 9 months out, and so you hadn't caught me yet. But the trick is you won't catch me, because when you get to 7 years and plus, I'm hoping to be on up there past that as well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And let me ask you to do something. Every program I end by saying a little phrase. It's stay stronger, friends. I'm going to let you say that today. I'm going to shut my mouth. So let me say, and let Marion say to everybody one thing, and that's what?
Stay stronger, friends.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we will see you when we do.